by Tony Tennille. That is my art name. And to know me is a very long story. So I can say that I've been doing art since I was maybe 8 years old. My father taught me, actually, probably before that, but my father guided me through my first oil painting at 8.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's still hanging up in their house right now. It's kind of funny because
Aw,
I'm like,
I love
I
that.
look at my progression from 8 years old. Oh man. Look at my progression from 8 years old and where I am now in my life. It is, of course, a significant difference, but my first medium was oil, which is really funny. My first serious medium was oil. So I learned how to mix, how to be patient, how to draw figures without any formal training, except for as my dad. But I come from a family of like artists, who people who like to do interior decoration all the way down to architecture. My sister's into architecture. Well, not is into, she's actually um, not an architect, but she went to school for architecture and now works as a director of construction. So we're a bunch of creatives. Um, and I went to school for fashion. So it's like I'm a full circle artist. I went to school for fashion. I minored in fine art. From there, I learned like how to sculpt. I love sculpture, and then from sculpture, I went to acrylic, and then from acrylic, I was doing and still do sew and design my own clothes. I make bags now, and at this point, I've gone digital. So I've gone a full circle. Oh, and also you can't forget cosmetology. I went to school for hair as well. So I'm just like a lifetime learner, I guess. Lifetime creative. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's my story.
Amazing, amazing. Go ahead, Toy.
I'm Toya, known as Toya from Harlem, and I am a writer, social media manager, and a podcaster, and a historian. And so I guess my mediums are like, writing and audio experience now with podcasting. And I also write a lot about art. I collect art and consider myself, I guess, an artist in some form. And I really focus on amplifying like people of color, Black women and men voices through my work. And as a historian, I have a podcast called That Wasn't in My Textbook, which is all about just like reimagining what history is and how it's taught and just like not making it lame and pretentious and boring and white. And so that's kind of a sum of what I do. And I'm just like happy to be here on this panel and to talk to you all. Of course, like my name is Toya from Harlem. I'm in LA, but being from Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance means a lot to me. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Amazing. And all right, AJ's here. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey, for sure. Sorry about that, everybody. Traffic in LA, but yeah, I'm AJ. You guys can hear me, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm AJ. Both everybody here is a friend to me in some other way or form, but I've been in LA particularly for the last 5 or 6 years, just working through museums and the art structure. Now I can start to call myself an acting curator. I have an upcoming project opening on March 20th that I'm super excited about. Thank you. Just kind of making space for artists of color has been my vibe for life, really. Definitely, I'm sure we'll talk about undergrad and like Howard and all the different experiences that I've gotten to shape that perspective. But that's um, that's who I am in a nutshell. I think definitely interested in people and art people, and the idea of Harlem Renaissance to me is like like it's the best of the thoughts. So I'm super glad to think about how we are doing that today, for sure.
Awesome. I'm going to actually leave the conversation, but I guess I can make a quick little note about what Super is. So, Super is a multidisciplinary art workspace that is dedicated to servicing Black and Brown artists, photographers, writers, the full spectrum, as Tony says. Like, we all service the full spectrum when we say the word creative and artist. So I'm creating a space, a physical space for us to work out of, similar to like a co-working space, but specifically for artists. And so because of the pandemic, I've had to slow down on actually opening that type of space. And so instead, I'm providing the content and the programming digitally. And so this is our first panel that we're offering our members. And so, yeah, I'm like excited for this conversation. And AJ, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the first tones of the situation I'd like to set is just like, I'm sure we can jokingly get through how we all know each other and like those micro moments where, like, to me, something about the Renaissance is super interesting to think about is like these amazing people were friends and they all found themselves in art history books or whatever, dating each other, not talking to each other, whatever that was, and those things actually became the sort of the basis of that. So like, y'all want to just kind of go around the table like talk about, because I know, like, for me, for us, I think it was an art show.
Yeah, I actually met you, AJ, and Toya the same day.
Yeah.
Oh, that's always the best. Okay, see what I'm saying?
I had, when I had first moved to Los Angeles, now it's 5 years, shoot. 5 years ago, I started a group me with like all of the Black kids that had moved from New York or the East Coast. And so just to kind of create a little community, and Toya was added from another friend. And then I was like, oh, great, an art person, somebody that likes to go to galleries and stuff. Like, yay, finally. Out of like 40 people being in this group chat, there was only me and her at the time. So we ended up going to the exhibit, and I'm not remembering what exhibit it was.
It's like Leon, yes.
So we had gone to that exhibit, and a few of our other friends were there at the same time. And then my friend Bryant introduced me to you, AJ, and then Toya walked in. So I was like, oh, okay.
And I was with Tyree.
This is my first time meeting Tony. So like, this is like,
I thought it was Tyree as well. So shout out to all those different voices, because I know Tyree does very similar work to me, and was like a big figure for me getting in the arts game in LA, which I thought was damn near impossible at one point, which is how I know Tony, because Howard and the campus life and HBCU and the whole culture of like, and I also just want to say, I know it's an intimate conversation, but like, feel free to drop things in the chat, especially as we start naming things that are like artists that you maybe have never heard of or that inspire you or thoughts or whatever. Like, I love Black Twitter and real-time conversation for the fact that we can engage that way. So I have the chat open, but you know, anyone listening, feel free to interact there as well. But yeah, like, I think Tony just was someone who, as a freshman, I think were you a junior?
Was I a junior or was I a senior?
I think you were a junior. I can't remember, but I just remember being like wowed. Like, there was someone who, her looks were never the same twice. You know, it could be blue hair one day, blonde bob the next. Like, she was just such a chameleon. And this was a time when everybody came from wherever they came from as like the biggest person at their high school. At least I think those interactions with like freshman year in college, if we can all just go back or whatever, you're like, I know I was tight. And then you get there and you're like, oh, everybody looks like me. So I just always really was like enamored by your presence and seeing you around the campus, and even just like still keeping up with both of you guys as women in the arts has really been amazing too, because I think as far as I've gotten in making space for artists, I've realized that there's a huge conversation still to be had about Black women's perspectives in particular. So I would love to, maybe even we just like kick the can around thinking about like the elephant in the room, Black art in the market, in the capital, and in the commercialism, especially during February. Like, I feel like my plate is so full all the time with like, I don't know. I'm sure y'all all have your own experiences.
Everybody wants a piece in February.
Yeah. Which is really terrible, because I'm still processing the whole COVID like thing as a whole. I think like where we were this time last year is like Black people, like, it's so like, it feels so vulnerable. And so for people to ask you to turn around and like be the face of their marketing campaign or help them sell another thing, it's just like, isn't it, it's like a little too soon for that, you know? But under this guise of like the Harlem Renaissance and the Renaissance. I'm like, was it ever really separated, the market and the art?
Mhm.
I don't know what y'all think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's interesting because my perspective might be a little different. I don't know. I've always been in black spaces my entire life,
Yeah.
except for maybe high school. It was a little integrated. But I think this year kind of like opened up a space that was not familiar to me. The space of really seeing in my face, like, okay, black vulnerability, um, you know, black exploitation in a sense, as you're saying. Um, but then at the same time, it's a time of empowerment, and
Yes.
I've never felt so much power in the same breath. Like last year, as ridiculous as it was like the beginning of something brand new for me that I had not experienced. Um, I don't know if you all feel that way, but I didn't I didn't really feel um, when companies were paying attention. I felt like it was like, okay, yeah, you need to pay attention. If that makes sense.
Yeah, they got told to pay
Haven't been
attention.
paying
Sure.
attention, and yes, something as tragic as this has created this, this Big Bang effect or whatever. I still felt like even though it's happening, it needs to happen. It needs to continue to happen. You need to like see us. No matter what it takes, you need to see us. That's how I saw it. Maybe you all have different perspectives, but
I agree with you on the whole idea of like coming from black safe spaces and like organically trying to maintain those. I mean, you think about like the Underground Museum and all these places in LA, CAM, all the work that like all the people that we're naming has done to make safe space for us, because it seems so not like that. As soon as we take two steps outside, we're like,
are you there?
I think he's frozen.
Oh no.
That was such an important point.
Yeah. Are you there?
humanity, you know?
You went out.
Frozen. You got to say that again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I was just thinking through like, how do you even like separate the humanity or the art from the market and the profit? Like I get why they want us because we lit and it's great and it's always been that, but it's also like what she was saying was like, I was like, when do we have real time to like process trauma? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you actually deal with that? I don't even know how y'all are dealing with that because I know I feel stretched for sure.
Mhm.
Honestly, I processed my trauma through drawing, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that's like, that might not be everybody's situation, but I created one of the strongest pieces I think I've ever created, as a result of just like feeling so much. I think it was the day that Trump took the Bible, walked across, and did that whole,
Mhm.
that stupid thing that he did. But anyways, that day I was so infuriated. I lost so much sleep, and all I could do to process was to draw and draw it out, draw my feelings because I'm not great with words.
Yeah.
Um, I might be great, like maybe writing them down, but as far as like verbalizing them and talking out my feelings, I'm better with like drawing it out. I wish I could pop the example up and show you all what I did, but and with that, you talk about how do you separate like the profit or the profit from the situation, from the trauma. In that situation, I wasn't even looking to be paid for that. Like in most situations, I'm not looking to be paid. I'm just looking like I want to produce. I need to purge my emotions. Um, but in that case specifically, like I posted it up, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, I need this piece. I need this piece. How much are you charging?" And I just felt so much guilt off of selling this piece for profit. So what I did instead was I said, "Hey, look, what you all can do is I'll send you all a PDF of it. It was a digital. I'll send you all a PDF of it. You all can print it however you all want to print it, but put it towards something. Put it towards an organization that supports Black people
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form." That's the way I saw it, as giving back. But I didn't do it for the profit of it all. But yeah, I processed through drawing it all out.
So what's up with you? I don't want to make sure
I
that
was gonna say, just like piggybacking off of what Tony just said, like I started my podcast
yes.
in teen last year, and it was not, the idea wasn't like, oh, like, am I gonna make money from this? You know, I mean, of course, over time, maybe you start to entertain that idea, but like, it really was a therapeutic release for me. I was just like, I am, you know, after kind of getting over the initial shock and some of like the trauma of the different, you know, Breonna Taylor and all those murders that we witnessed, I was like, okay, like I want to do, like, what do I want to do? Like, how do I want to contribute to this time right now? And I just felt like there was a need to celebrate and learn history. Like, I think like you both similar said, and similar to me, like I grew up in very like Black spaces, especially like for me at elementary and middle school, you know. And when I got out of that, I realized a lot of people did not have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a unique experience. It's a beautiful experience. And so I wanted to kind of recreate that with my podcast and use that as a place to talk about history, Black people history, and other people of color history that's not just like focused on slavery and colonialism. Because I
Yes.
think like people just hone in on that, and it's like, that's not how we started. That's not how it's going to end. That is a very important piece, but I think we should know other things so that we can feel like our sense of pride and joy, and you know, be able to kind of process some of these emotions in other ways, you know, if that's listening or looking at art, or, you know, so I just wanted to kind of provide that medium through my podcast. And just like hearing you say that, Tony, just made me realize like, yeah, this was like a therapeutic option for me. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, you know, because I want to learn more. I want to share more that I've learned and know. And then, you know, I want to hopefully instill some hope and pride in people, because it was like, it was a very hard time to be a Black person, you know, juggling racism in a pandemic. You know, it's like, do I want to go to this protest? Is it safe for me to go to this protest? I feel like I need to go to this protest. So it was just kind of like my way of finding like a safe space for me that felt like I was a part of, you know, everything that was happening.
When she asked me kind of like Crystal started saying like, who would you want to be in conversation with? It was so easy for me to talk to both of you guys, like just thinking of it in my mind, because it was like, when I think about the interactions I have with you guys both as Black women, they're usually very free. They're usually very free ones, you know, whether it's like a social vibe at a art show, or like Tony's gonna hate me for saying this, but like I see her just at parties, like living her best life, dancing and doing her thing, and no one could get Tony to just give her the time of the day. And that's not even what I was looking for, but just like as someone who was like so young, I was like, she's a free person, she's a free Black, like she's free, and I just wanted to like maybe open up space, just like not to do this thing, but just to really like specifically look at like the experience of like Black creative women in this time, in this moment, because I've found that like it does parallel the work of the Harlem Renaissance. Like it to me does parallel, like it doesn't shock me that Breonna Taylor didn't get what she needed out of that, unfortunately, because it's like this is how we respect and think and revere the women in our community in some ways, you know? So like how did that affect your mentals, your creatives, did you feel like, you know, I don't want to make this assumption, but I feel like so many women in my life are givers naturally, that it's like the thing now is like, are you protecting yourself? You know, like, are you keeping enough for you? But I'll let y'all talk. I just wanted to steer it that way.
I mean, I think it really, I think this whole time period, particularly for Black people, Black women, really kind of amplified the idea of like self-care, you know, just, and self-care doesn't necessarily mean like facials and stuff like that. It could be, but it also means like setting boundaries and, you know, saying no, and, you know, being able to vocalize when you're uncomfortable. And I think it kind of just like redefined that for me. You know, it's not just like about soaking in the bathtub. That's great, but it's also about like handling my business, my boundaries, and being honest about how I feel. And I feel like, you know, it was, I mean, 2020 was very hard, I think, at many different points. And Breonna Taylor was just, it was even like harder, I think. And then like, you know, going through, it kind of feels after a while, I think after you, as a Black person, you've seen so many trials against police and they continue to get off. It just feels like, I don't know, kind of, it feels surreal. Like you're kind of like, you already know. You're like, I already know, but you still watch it, you know? And so I think like, no, I wasn't surprised, but it was just like, okay, like here we go again. And I did a whole, I ended up doing a whole episode on the history of police, because I just wanted to learn about like where they came from. And I just like learned so much about how like, you know, police really didn't form until like slavery was over. And that was for a reason, you know what I'm saying? And like slave patrols was a thing. And it's really just the root of policing is about controlling the Black body and movements and communities. And just to like uncover that, you know, in books and actually see it, even though you know it and you're experiencing it, was just kind of like the icing on the cake for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it made me numb.
Yeah.
Not
That's a good
numb
word.
in the sense of like I don't care, because I do care, and that's why it made me numb. Like I think about like all the situations that I've ever had in the past that brought me to a very solemn or dark, sad place, and my reaction was always to go numb. Um, so I think last year it was an eye opener that yes, you do need to have self care. Yes, you do need to create those boundaries, as you said. And but that's also on top of like the pandemic as well, because on top of that situation, we had people dying left and right with us. I had to say goodbye to my students in
Hmm.
the most weirdest ways, you know,
Yep.
through this, like through the through the
Yeah.
computer.
Yep.
I had to say goodbye to students for like, you know, I'd been with for 4 years, had to deal with their tears, had to deal with their depression. So I'm taking on everybody else's pain as well, you know, and still being able to, not even being able to, but trying to be able to function. So not, I wouldn't even call it self care, but my guard was to go numb.
Hmm.
Um, but through that numbness, in a weird way, I was able to create a lot of things. Like I would just escape, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of just, you know, get lost in that happy place of creating something that does not exist around me right now. So I guess that's my way of self-care.
No, that last bar is important because I think that I don't mean to make this conversation like let's talk about the issues and the traumas of the Black community, but I think that like really the time period of the Harlem Renaissance was built on
Mm-hmm.
that. So out of that expression, then came all of this jazz and all this happiness and all this dancing and all of this like, what do you call it when the club shouldn't be a real like what do they like loot the club? It's like the party shouldn't happen, but it's happening. Like I feel like we're in that time right now because I still see, especially if you have people and close friends, like they'll tell you like they're still out doing things, and I'm like, are we not supposed to be? It feels like the Renaissance on so many levels, and it's also interesting because I'll have like a lot of people outside of our community. Anytime that word is thrown around, then all of a sudden they want to be very, very interested. And like, I'm like, this is so crazy because it's like literally what it was. You know, I think about so many artists like Archibald Mobley, his artwork really does respond to the white gaze during the Harlem Renaissance. You'll always see, not to make art history moment, but that's what I know. And like, you'll always see in the back of one of his paintings where everybody's having fun and joyful, there's somebody on the wall. And that's supposed to represent this people outside of our community that were like coming into our parties, coming into our churches, coming into our safe spaces and like looking and trying to figure out what can I turn into money or profit or whatever. So it's dope that you guys would both choose to make joy out of something that is so dark and hopeless right now. What's keeping y'all inspired? Like just on like what like just little stuff like or what podcasts, TV shows, music, artists, what are y'all looking at?
I wouldn't say I don't, because I'm not getting out these walls. It's driving me crazy. At most, I'll go for a drive, and that's about it, and get myself some Starbucks. But to be honest, the thing that inspires me is just a new medium, I guess.
That's dope.
It's a medium being digital, and with digital, it's like the whole world has opened up to me because you know when you're an artist that uses canvas, that uses a material, a specific material that costs money, that costs space, that costs you know, other things that right now are not in my what do you call it, in my bubble right now.
Yeah.
So I've gone into the whole digital space, and with digital, it's like the options are endless. So my inspiration is more like, let me play with this color, let me play with these relationships, these color relationships, let me play with this texture. How can I make something look like liquid even though this is straight digital, so that's where my inspiration is. It's more that like the inspiration comes from the experimentation for me.
That's always been you though, I
Yeah.
think. Like, I remember, well, I just always think about like before I even knew, not to be weird, but I was coming from the South, like Texas, where yeah, of course, obviously people experiment with their looks, but I would look at you and I'm like, she got on blue hair, like she doesn't care. This was like well before that trend was like regular, or like that idea of like kawaii black people. I don't even know what you were calling it because I could never, it was never consistently the same. Like I just always be like, yo, this is that Tony? Like I'm like, is that Tony? Like I have to ask him, is that Tony? Because I don't know. She kind of looked like Tony, but y'all don't know, and I know it's hard to visualize this, but like I would always just really be like, early Khalees, early, all these different women come to mind when I think about the type of way you would experiment with your body as a form of self-expression. So I really, really know that you are super consistent in that.
Yeah.
Toya as well. I think about like when she said something about the idea of like working within your means. I think about how you're really working through, like, I love following your Instagram and the books that you're reading and the things that, the little known Black history facts. Like you find ways to bring up things that people feel so out of reach with. Does that experience sit true for you too? Like how are you processing? What's inspiring you?
I feel like, I mean, this might be a little cheesy, but I just feel like every like Black person, especially, we're inside, we're in these walls. So it's like the only thing you really have for the most part is like TV or computer. And I feel like I've really tried to curate some of my social media to just like show me really dope Black people. And they have been inspiring to me, like I follow some really dope Black photographers, like Mark C, and like just like different people who are really like telling stories, Black stories, with whether it's with a camera, a paintbrush, the computer. And so like I just get inspired from seeing that. And even just like, Black History Month, I feel like people are Black all year round. And I feel like as a part of the Renaissance, people are unapologetically Black, 365, 24/7, which I appreciate. But I think like in Black History Month, people go extra hard. And I'm just always like excited to see it. And I learned so much. Like I'm excited to share, but I'm always like, oh, what is this person doing? Oh, what's this project? Like even your AJ, your recent project with Champion. I'm like, oh, that's cool, and then it was with a Black photographer that I love,
Oh
Jazz.
yeah, shout out to the yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like I feel like I get lost and it's like, oh, I look at this thing that AJ's doing, then I click on the photographer. I'm like, oh, this is a dope Black photographer, and then I just get like lost in all the creativity and just like the self-expression. And I think that really inspires me. It helps me even come up with topics for my podcast. I'll be looking at something like, oh, I want to do a history of painting, and then I like hit the person up. So it just kind of becomes kind of like a cascading effect when I like get into that zone. But I feel like, reading definitely has helped me to kind of escape during this time and has been an inspiration because sometimes I need to get off the screen. But then when I'm on the screen, just following dope Black creators and just seeing what they're doing and who they're collaborating with really inspires me and challenges me to keep going and to do stuff better as well.
I'm so inspired by that because I definitely try to make a super strong point of view, like especially after leaving Howard, and like then you have the real world again where it's like all cultures, all point of views, people who've never experienced Black pride, and they still think it's a very monolithic experience where we're all like one thing. Like I have to purposefully make effort to like make sure everything I'm doing is us, you know what I'm saying? And that to me, that's why I trip when the places and the brands start to pay attention, because I'm like, what's new? There's nothing really new. That's why I think the idea of the Renaissance is like both a progressive but also an insulting concept, because it's like new to you possibly. Like that's like I could be like, oh, that's Tony, like, oh yeah, that's Toya, like this is what they do, this is very consistent. But the brands, like, they don't know. Or the Renaissance inspires this idea that like at some level Black has changed from what it was to where it's going. And I don't know if y'all have any comments on that, but the Black that I inspire to see in the world is the one that is like where I come from.
Yeah.
Like so much of the shows and the things that I try to do, even on the way I operate Instagram, I'm like, I want it to feel like a small ecosystem. I want you to feel like you're like actually like you're still a part of something, and everything you do is still necessary. Like I've been leaving artists on the notes of like, I hope you're still creating. I hope you're still making, like, I hope you don't feel in this masked world that we won't live through this, because we've always lived through this, you know. um I don't know, it feels like church when I start talking to people on the Zoom calls, because
I feel like a lot of brands are kind of like, they get into this whole like Christopher Columbus, like we discovered Black people type of
don't they, dog?
thing,
Yeah.
especially during when different heritage months come around. They do it to Black folks, they do it to Pride, they do it to all the other people who have months. And these months are in place because we normally don't get celebrated, not because you're supposed to market it. You know, that's like the initial thought behind it. And so they've turned it into a marketing strategy, which is like great capitalism, colonialism all over again. But I think that's where the conflict feels like. It's like normally I'm like fine, and then I think in the past year or two, I felt differently during Black History Month because I see brands trying to capitalize on it in a way that's not authentic and not really about the root of what it's created for. And that just makes it hard. And I like recently wrote something saying like, if you're a brand and you only reach out to Black people during Black History Month, like you're still a part of the problem. And and I stand by that, and I feel like that's kind of what it's become. I think off of the cusp of like last year, everything that happened last year, and then the celebration of Juneteenth, and now it becomes like these marketing traditional like American holidays, and it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So, Tony, you didn't get to go to the Lamar Park, the vibe in LA. I went there last year for Juneteenth, and I know we were in the middle of like safety precautions, whatever, but it was flooded with Black people from one side of Lamar Park to the other side, and I just thought that was so empowering, because it's like, does this thing stop culture? Like, does culture, us, African, whatever it is, like, it's gonna progress. And I think that that's why I was like, so when she's like, who do you want to talk to? I was like, I want to talk to the women in my community that I admire, because I think that's where you're gonna note strength. If they're moving forward, then we're all moving forward. If they're not moving forward, then we're not moving. And I'm tired of seeing so many panels where it's like all men talking about the things that they've done in the last the shit that they're buying, whatever the hell. Like, I'm kind of really wanting to talk about like the inside, the creators and nurturers. And I love that, like, as I look at y'all's backdrops, I'm like, this is so ideally them, like plants and glittery stuff. Like, they come in multitude. This is not like a monolithic conversation, So I trip because brands keep thinking that it's that, like they want that so bad. And this Renaissance wants leaders so bad that is like separate than its community. And I see people taking those bags all the time. I'm like, people don't even talk to you. Like, you don't even, no one knows you around here. But they're the face of the damn campaign. So yeah, I mean, any things that you guys want to discuss? I know we're like out of time crunch too. So I want to make sure that even if we go super wide, I want to make sure everybody's points are being.
Do you think that we are experiencing a renaissance now? And what's the difference between?
Can you say that again?
Do you think that we are experiencing a renaissance right now? What do you think makes?
Actually, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Even though I said I don't really like the idea of the Renaissance,
Yeah.
we're writing, we're producing. I'm surprised that you guys didn't even name, like, what is the show? Bennington? What is it? What is this show on Netflix?
Oh, Washington?
Yeah, like, I'm surprised y'all didn't go there, because I binge watched it and I was like asking myself, do they know that at that time, like, Black people weren't? But it's funny because it was meant to free you from that, I suppose, right? Like the idea of like slavery and all that. So
I have so many conflicting feelings about that show.
I'm just surprised y'all didn't say that, but I appreciate your answers. But for me, like, yeah, I do think so, because why I say that is because like our control of the narrative is stronger than I think it's ever been, or at least in the last like 20, 30 years. I think that we're out of this space where we have to feel like one of us only, or subscribing. Like, I think that it's interesting to see women with their Bantu knots, or the myth of the bisexual Black man. All these different things are being addressed publicly, and it's really great, because I'm like, yo, like, there's a shift. Something is happening. Like, we don't give a fuck, or we feel safe enough and more in control to do what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think, Tony?
I think it's both. I think, but at the same time, I feel like we've been doing our thing regardless. Like, we are the people that created art. We brought it here. I
Hmm.
mean, you want to talk about the Renaissance? We brought the art here. We brought the dance. We brought the entertainment. We brought all those things. So, it's just been cultivating in our community. And through time, it's like it's gone international to the point where we're influencing people so much with our culture that it gets appropriated and then sold. But then when we do it, it's like, oh no, what is that?
I was just about to ask you to comment on that, Tony. The other day we talked and you said something about being inspired by, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but like taking inspiration from all things. And so I was like, also too, as a Black creative, don't y'all feel pressured to keep our conversations in such a packaged form thing? Like that keeps coming up for me too. It's like, bro, I'm a Black kid who's inspired by color. I want to talk about color. I don't want to always talk about the image in the
Mhm.
work or the struggle in the work. But I think that that's what they keep hitting me on the head for
Mhm.
or tapping me on the shoulders for, So
It's about the conversation behind it, which I mean, that is art. Art is about a conversation, but the conversation should be in my. I'm not even going to tell people how they should create their art. I'll speak about myself. When I create my art, I'm creating it based off an emotion,
yeah,
based off of a color that I'm feeling for that day, and I do it unapologetically. Um, Whether it's embraced or not, I make my art for, as I said before, like I make my art to purge and not necessarily for the approval or for the acceptance of the viewer. It's either you connect with it or you don't. That's how I make mine.
Mhm.
But I understand like the pressure. I think I was talking to you about this before where I was saying like if you don't have this mindset of here's this collection or this consistent theme that I'm pushing out, then I can't be taken seriously as an artist, even though I've been painting since I was 8 years old and I've used every single medium underneath the sun. It's like I'm not validated unless I have a body of work that speaks to a specific conversation.
they're scared of you. I think the art world is scared of artists like you. No, for sure, because that means that you are in control and you can change your mind. And that's what's scary is history wants it to be, they're looking for it to be a straight line story. That's not even accurate. Like I literally wouldn't be the man that I am if I hadn't interacted and seen you in the room, or I wouldn't be the person that I'm becoming if I didn't have someone like Toya in my community. Like I'm like, why do we why so much pressure to be one? Like the face of a thing is really where I'm like, I love the Renaissance ideally for so much, but I see people fighting for this damn shit like it's a musical chairs. And I'm just like I've even the books that I read Black Futures, and I love the idea of that being a collaborative effort, but it no shade or whatever, but my honest truth is it felt very East Coast. Like I was like, there wasn't really a lot of West Coast artists, and there's no one way to do this, but at the same time, it's like we can't be in community if we're scared to talk to each other or embrace each other. And then when you said something about like your work being rejected, I'm like, that's the thing. Like, are you hitting up the artists who aren't feeling ready? Like that they're like, are you giving them the opportunities? Or are you just giving the same for people with this coded thing, like the face of the movement? And it's not true. How you feel, Toya? Because I think too, like the work that you're doing, like, yes, it's not a paintbrush thing, but there is some social sculpting that I think you're really interested in that I love and admire so much.
I mean, just speaking to what you both are saying, I think just kind of like the idea of being boxed in, as an artist, whatever that is, if you're a writer or in a medium. And I even found myself kind of like questioning that because I feel like it's been so conditioned. Like, okay, can I be a historian with all my tattoos and like my
Yeah, talk about it.
and it's like, yeah, fuck that. I can and I am, and just kind of like, I think in a lot of forms, we're all like I think the thing about when I think about Renaissance is like reimagining things that we've been conditioned or that like, the powers that be have been conditioned or told us that we're like monolithic. We all think the same. We all watch the same things. We all paint the same. You have to do it this way. You have to talk about history this way. You have to do your art with a theme. And it's just like, I think that's what I feel like the Renaissance is just saying, like, fuck all that. Like, we're unapologetic.
Yeah.
What I want, and like you can ride with me or not. I'm not going to use your standards as my compass to like create for myself. And or if I want to share that with others, I want to do that. If I don't, it's for me. And I think that's kind of like where the marketing and all that other stuff comes in and can screw your kind of like skew your creativity, because you're like, I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in it, especially with social media and like trying to chase a bag. I'm not mad at people for chasing a bag, but it can kind of skew your authenticity or how you feel about different things or your process if you start to worry about that first before like whatever serves you or your art form.
It makes me feel often like imposter syndrome is knocking on my door. 9 times out of 10, it's crazy because I have to remind myself. I think it was even a part of my journey that I realized, like, when I'm sitting at these quote unquote tables, I'm like, wait, I went to Howard. We don't have to, or like HBCU, like we don't worry about sitting at tables. We build the tables. And then that's when I was like, yo, let me rearrange how I'm thinking, because for the longest time I kept trying to show up and be quiet. Everything you said about the tattoos, like people be like, hey, do you have tattoos? I was wearing long sleeve shirts. I was so afraid to breathe. I was so afraid to be. And then it's like, yo, when I really owned what I was bringing naturally, which were my people, every time we link up, it's like the coding is real, like the switching, like we know what it is. And that's why I'm like, everything about the Renaissance, you asked a great question. Is it happening right now? I'm like, absolutely. Absolutely. But has it ever stopped? That's the thing where it's like, they're looking at us now. That's what is defining this new generation, but it's not that we weren't already existing, there's so many dope. I mean, when I was thinking about like what inspires me, there's so many dope women, Black artists like that I'm looking at right now at this time that have been saying some really crazy stuff, like Augusta Savage and Clementine Hunter and Amy Sherrill. Like everybody's just throwing out all these different things, and I'm like, I hate that. Like oftentimes, and I'm sorry I'm taking up so much space in this conversation, but I remember like even Solange said this, she's like, why are all of our artists like 90? Why all the Black women have to be aged out before we finally get some shine? And I was like, damn, like, it's true. I don't, so I appreciate it. Like, again, when she asked me how to do this, I was like, I want to do this where they could tell you no in the real life. Or they could tell you, I want to talk about this, not that, Are y'all feeling labored and weighed down by like this whole thing? Because for me, I keep coming back to that. I'm just like, what's the climate? What's the climate like? How do you think we can get out of this? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm asking like a deeper question.
Of what exactly? When you say that, you're saying get out of the theme of what? Out of the theme of
the gaze is so strong all the time. What do you think? What do you think will help us operate out of this together?
Honestly, and I've been thinking about this for a very long time. I feel like what's gonna get us out of the gaze is for us to stop paying attention to the gaze and to pour into ourselves as Black creatives. I was listening to a conversation. I forget what the topic of the conversation was, but they were talking about how there aren't enough Black collectors, right? And I feel like if we poured into and put the same type of hype that we put towards our fellow Black creatives that we do towards other products, like things that, I'm not going to name any names, I don't know if I can, but other brands that don't serve us, that weren't built for us, that we idolize, and when we get that bag we wind up spending money on it, but it's never an investment. It's more of a, it's just a thing that we have that makes us feel better,
right, for that moment until the next thing.
Exactly. Yep. Like, I think we need to have or cultivate this environment of the Black collector, if anything.
Yeah.
So that we can support our fellow Black creatives. And then the thing with like the Renaissance was that there were so many creatives, but then by the time they were towards the end of their lives, they never made any money. So that's another thing, you have to cultivate those collectors so that you'll be able to support your Black artists in whichever space that we are creatives, support and pour in instead of go outward and look for other spaces for us to pour our money and our investments into, because this is an investment. When you think of art, you think of investing. Yeah, I just think it would be better that way to change the gaze. It wouldn't be, we wouldn't need it to be honest.
Yeah. I feel like this time is like the best time too, because like this split of like, I tell artists this a lot too. My suspicion is like right when COVID hit this time last year, not only were emerging artists stopped, everybody was like affected, but then even the big name artists, like I don't even think that like artists that like have everything going is perfect for them right now. So I think really, to me, if we use this metaphor of like a musical chairs or whatever, a seat at the table, it's a fresh start. Everybody has the same, because at this point we all have similar context on what we feel right now. It's like the Great Depression all over again, and what comes out of that is culture, producing art and images and sounds and noises and books and podcasts and all the different things. So I'm like, yeah, this is the best time, but at the same time, it's like we also, as you said, I think we have to invest in ourselves like nuclearly before we can have this effect that we've already seen happen, where we're like, Japanese kids are dressing like they're from Compton or Crenshaw. We've seen it go down already, but we actually at this point need to pull it back so that South African kids also feel connected to that. Like that we're speaking Black diasporically, not just like whatever. But I love you for saying that. You always say what needs to be said. Toy, you want to say anything too? I know we're looking at our last 10 minutes as well.
No, I mean, I think she summed it up perfectly. And, before the pandemic hit, I went to all these galleries and art shows, and, I'd be like, I want to collect art. I'm not ready there. I'm not there yet, but I think it is important. And I think even just like outside of even collecting, just even being able to walk into those spaces, find those spaces, support Black artists that are in those spaces, because they're like one of a few, is also important if you don't have like the monetary stuff yet. Just even just being in those spaces, going to the galleries, supporting their work, whether it's the curator, or the artist, is important as well.
It's such a new role for me. I mean, literally just going to all the spaces and being super curious for such a long time to actually see these things be actualized from my own point of view right now feels so freeing. But I'm just like, it's the beginning, because there are so many potholes. I just kind of got into a conversation with the Black elder being like, I'm tired of group shows. I'd love to see like more like focused moments of artists, like, because as like Tony's saying, like I can't just take a piece of one of her works and throw it on the wall. That's not going to encompass her. You really don't really know what she's about until you let her make her own world. And I trip on like, but I'm impatient too, because I want everything today. And so much of what feels like the internet, you want it in the first 5 seconds of looking at it. You're like, why don't I own this? Why is this not right now? And that's to me the trap, too. So what's something else we can just also I want to inspire the people in our communities too to be listening to this and to each other. You're a reader. What books are you reading? What are you engaging in right now?
I read a lot of novels.
Okay,
so.
I'm not at all. So I was like, you took it there. Okay, great.
I read a lot of novels. So, but let's see, I'm currently reading The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, which is like a short story book about just like church politics, Black church politics, which I think is like very interesting and like enlightening to see. I feel like a lot of Black people start out in the church. I don't know if you know what I mean? Like in the beginning,
Sure.
that's very much a part of like Black culture at some point. So it's kind of like nostalgic reading some of the things about like Bible study and stuff like that, although I'm not in the church any longer. I read Vanishing Half, which is like another book. It's just like exciting, like in the book world, there's been a lot of like Black women coming out with really good books. And then the books are now going to be coming out like, like I read The Vanishing Half. And so like, Tessa Thompson's supposed to be producing that on HBO.
I was about to say something to that, but I didn't know if I could say that. I was like, I heard that was about to be turned into okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot, I think, in terms of the Renaissance, even in like the film and the book world, that is in fruition, that's going to happen. And I'm excited to see, how a lot of these books are going to come out. Because I feel like, you know, people have, with the pandemic, we've kind of revisited like plant life and reading, just all these things that we normally did, but we're kind of distracted by the outside world. And now that we can't really travel or go to happy hour as much, you know, it's like kind of force people to rediscover like what they like to do, you know, off the screen.
Tony, you reading? I said to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
She was like, next question.
To be honest, I'm pouring myself into a lot of different areas right now. So the books that I am actually not learning, but reading right now are books that are towards like tech. So it's nothing like super interesting, but it's.
But I've been hearing people use that Black tech is a new community or a community too.
Listen, okay, and if you want to talk about art, there's another space for art as well in the tech world. That's
Are you talking about like the crypto chronic thing?
crypto art and AR, VR. Like
Yeah. Video gaming, I feel like as well.
I seriously nerd out when it comes to that stuff.
Found our second part of this panel then. Are Black people in the future?
And that was one of the reasons why I was joining tech. I went and learned what was it, software engineering. So that's my like daytime, you know, venture or whatever.
Yeah.
But through that world, it's just opened up this whole creative space that has not been tapped in as heavily as it should be with the Black community. So that was one of the biggest reasons why I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to learn software engineering and figure out how I'm going to like create this space. So through it, like I've just been learning so much about it. And also I saw like from my students when I was teaching that there were so many kids that were interested in STEM that I was like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna figure this out. You guys have inspired me to create my space in that world. So that's another reason why I'm kind of working digital as well, because I want to see how I'm going to integrate into that. So
I mean, these kids are setting us off in a whole new tone. Like I knew I was like quote unquote of a different generation with the TikTok movement. When I started to see how fast those, like I was like, y'all are dancing. And I follow Embracing Black Culture on Instagram, and they were like, remember when dancing used to use your feet?
exactly.
Like barely. But no, I mean I love that, and I guess to y'all's point, like my thing is maybe more so at this point reading books about looking backwards. I'm reading a book on Manet's handling of the Black model that was really interesting for me, because it's always the speculation of like, you know, where is the beauty, how does it lie? So I don't know if just to like quickly point y'all to that, the woman that was in the back of that famous painting was deemed a slave historically for so many years, but she was actually a free Black woman of color who was sitting for this painting that he framed to make her look like maybe she was a worker, to continue that narrative through. So he was as progressive as he was reductive to the experience. So I was just like, damn, this is crazy. Because if you look at 2021, you might see something like that today. So we have 5 minutes left. Let's maybe just do this thing of like, what we want to see in the world before we get out of here. Let's keep everybody on a positive note. Send off maybe.
Y'all want to go first? I don't want to tap out. I didn't pay attention to this thing.
Oh.
Give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
You want to go first, Toby?
No, you should go first, AJ.
All right, well, I will say this. With the efforts of things like this, I hope that we continue to make space and community, whether it's intimately the groups that we have or widespread. Like I hope that Black people continue to invest in communicating with each other, because I think that's what we'll start to see and understand. Our experiences are more similar than they are different.
Yeah, that was, I feel like, what do I want to, I want to just continue to see Black people just, you know, be themselves, be unapologetic, and in whatever form that is. I think for a long time, you know, it was like we all feel the same way. We all wear our hair the same way. We all talk the same way. And I think like as we all express ourselves more, that like other people will understand that it's not like that. And, you know, you can have purple hair, you can have all different types of stuff and still be, you know, move forward, be an artist and express yourself. Because I feel like that's one of the things. It's like this whole, like, you know, even as an artist, it's like, okay, you're representing all Black people. And that's like a lot of pressure. And I feel like it's a little unfair. And you should just be able to like represent yourself or maybe your family, but to be like the whole culture, you know, white artists don't have that same pressure. And so I would like to see a world where people can be, you know, represent, but be individuals and be respected and encouraged in that.
I love that. And give those purple haired Black people their roses for real. Cause I don't even think we would be where we were without some of these experimental personalities in our communities. Like again, Tony, like both of you really, I wouldn't even have been able to have half the perspective I have in these spaces if I didn't engage with people like y'all in my community. So that's my rose to y'all. But Tony, did you get you have an answer for us?
Um, I don't know. I what I would like to see is more spaces for the Black creative.
I
That's
agree.
what I want to see. Um, more collectors, as I said, more Black collectors or collectors who appreciate Black artists.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think that would really really set me off just to see more people winning and more people eating and not having to live their lives as the starving artist, um, and they get to see the fruits of their labor before they die.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see more of. I think the whole culture just would really flourish if we poured more in to each other and saw the value in what we create in our own space.
Thank you, Tony. I also want to say before we pass it back to Crystal, thank you for platforms like this for existing and seeds like this being planted in our community where, again, no matter if it's 100 or 12 or whatever, we're trying to make community. So shout out to Super just for opening up that space. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for the amazing conversation. And I look forward to more panels just like this.
we got to figure out what this Black crypto chronic tech thing is.
Right. I actually wrote that down. I'm like, wait.
I was like, yeah, so investors, like what? So for sure, y'all, please enjoy the rest of this February.
Yeah.
You too.
It's ours. So
Yes, absolutely. Take care, you guys. And thank you to everyone who attended.
bye,
Thank you
everyone.
for having us. And thank you, AJ.
Love y'all.